Okay, we started. Cool. So, Vesta was talking about how we met last time, and what we did. One of the things we did last time was we shared a bunch of our views on things. I mean, we shared what we were doing generally and our interests in apologetics and things like that. And it wasn't explicitly said, but one of the impressions I got was that I have a very different understanding of how ethics works than the other people at the table. So I thought what I kind of wanted to do in this talk was to explain and partially defend the system of ethics that I hold to, as well as hopefully talk about how it interacts with certain things like particularly Protestant understanding of Scripture, and modern apologetics, particularly to do with the moral arguments, as well as cultural apologetics if we have time. So, as a fair introduction, so we'll be talking a lot about meta-ethics in this talk, so I figured I would define the term. Meta-ethics is that subfield of ethics, which does mainly two things. It seeks to define certain terms like good and moral and justice and virtue and things, and then it also seeks to explain how certain things are good and moral and virtuous and things. So it seeks to ground them is the term that we use. So roughly I wanted to talk about two meta-ethical views. The first is the one that I imagine many of us hold, and I think many Protestants would hold today, which is called divine command theory. Nod your head if you... Okay, cool. Good, so that was a good guess. And the second is the one that I want to defend, and sort of the one that I hold to and think best, and that's called natural law theory. Before we get into them, I feel like I should explain something. I should nuance this slightly. So they're not just two meta-ethical views. They also represent two different fundamental ways of developing a theory. They have completely different approaches. Well, not completely, but very different approaches. So like many modern theories, divine command theory sort of starts out with this somewhat mysterious term moral. It's like a special and mysterious term moral, which by the end of the theory you've explained and you've grounded. Okay? On the other hand, natural law theory, or at least the classical version that I'm sort of going to explain, the term moral sort of comes defined before you even start your theory, and the main focus of the theory is more to do with goodness and what goodness means. I mean, moral doesn't pick out anything particularly mysterious or special. So I thought I'd mention that because we're going to be using both senses of the word, and it can get confusing unless it's mentioned. Okay, so the divine command theory that I imagine most of us hold is the so-called essentialist divine command theory, if you've ever engaged with it, and that's the theory defended by people like William Lane Craig and a philosopher called Robert Adams, if you've ever engaged with this kind of stuff. And I thought I'd sort of summarize some of its main points, just for the sake of comparison with the natural law theory. So I said moral, the term moral picks out facts that are sort of most fundamental and which derive from God. That's why we call it divine command theory. And by fundamental, I mean most overriding, I guess. So if your government commands you to do something that's otherwise immoral, then you have a duty to not do that, to refrain from that, because your moral duties are greater than your duties to your government. We divide up moral facts into moral duties on the one hand and moral values on the other hand. So value refers to the goodness or worth of something or someone, and duties refer to things like what you ought or ought not do, or the right and wrong. So you have good and evil as values and right and wrong as duties. It's called essentialist divine command theory because we ground values in God's nature or essence.